Okay, welcome to session 2 of the Empowered Transition. Excited to be able to share some really important information with you. I'm going to go straight in and share my screen. Uh, Today, we're going to talk about optimizing your nutrition throughout the menopause journey, and that's everywhere from the very start of perimenopausal symptoms all the way through um, basically end of life throughout your whole menopausal journey. Um, Today, this is what we're going to cover. We're going to review the 4 pillars and just ask you to check in with yourself, see how things are going. Did you get your menopause vision statement done? How did that go for you? What interesting things came up for you? Would love to hear about that. So feel free to reach out to either James or me and let us know. Then we're going to talk about natural hormone support through this important phase of life. And we also want to cover some of the nutrition basics because it isn't just about macronutrients, micronutrients, counting calories, or any of that. It really matters when you eat, where you eat, how you eat, as well as what you eat. We'll also talk about blood sugar balance because I think that's something that is overlooked oftentimes when we're talking about nutrition during the menopausal journey. And then gut health, also very important and very related to this. And then bone health as well, because of course we're all wanting to stay strong as we age and avoid osteopenia, osteoporosis. And then we'll talk a little bit about supplements because that's something that we're frequently asked about as health coaches. So let's just do a very quick review of the 4 pillars of vibrant health. So last time we talked about think, your perspective, the words you use, the inner talk that you have, and the way that you think about menopause really does shape your entire journey. And as James said last time, this is the first pillar that we cover because it's overarching. It really does serve as kind of an umbrella as well as a foundation for all of the other pillars that we talk about. But today we are going to talk specifically about how we eat. And in that sense, there are a lot of ways to provide natural hormone support for your body. So I turn it over to you, James.
Okay, thanks, Julie. And welcome back, everybody, for this session too. I think it's important to note here that when we talk about the menopause transition, quite often people assume that everything is only around sex hormones. We're all familiar with things like estrogen, progesterone, and things like that. But our hormones don't actually work in silo. They all work together. And that is why some of the things we're going to talk about today are quite important. And when I say our hormones, I don't just mean the sex hormones, I mean our stress hormones, our digestive hormones, our mindset hormones. That is one of the reasons that Julie and I work across all these various pillars, because there is interconnectedness, and we need to find what is called homeostasis or balance between all of those hormonal symptoms. So many years ago, I studied with a lady called Jo Gamble. She's a nutrition therapist here in the UK. She's very well regarded when it comes to natural support for hormonal fluctuations. And Jo says supporting the menopausal journey is a bit like helping a whole orchestra to play in harmony. The aim is always high, and we want every single instrument to play in tune. So what does she mean there? Basically, if you just look after the violins in the orchestra, let's say there were sex hormones, it means that everything else could be a cacophony behind us, and we don't want that to happen. Now, that's quite a highbrow way of explaining this. If Julie moves on to the next slide for me, this is my lowbrow way of explaining it. We want to make the journey less of a roller coaster and more of a merry-go-round. So we want to reduce these ups and downs that happen in our journey. You know, we know that they are part of the journey. You can't have a journey without having some twists and turns or some bumps along the way. But what we can do is try and make that journey as smooth as possible. And that is kind of what we're aiming for throughout today's session, but throughout the other 3 sessions as well, both the one that happened last week and the 2 that are coming up. So if you'd like to move on to the next slide again for me, please, Julie. So here are a few things then that can help support the balance of our sex hormones. And it's really important, again, to highlight that word support. When a health coach or a nutritionist or a functional medicine doctor, whoever says to you, that they can balance your hormones. They aren't being strictly true because we can't actually do that. This is not a scale where we take a lump off one side of it and put a lump on the other side. And so what we need to do is talk about supporting things. So we're trying to support hormonal harmony. And how are we trying to do that? Via lots of other hormonal systems as well. So the first one, Julie mentioned it before, blood sugar balance. Really, really key, because some of the symptoms of irregular blood sugar balance mimic some of the symptoms of the menopausal transition. Similarly, adrenal and thyroid function. Thyroid is our metabolic engine, the thing that makes our bodies work, our furnace, if you like. And then the adrenal system helps with stress and reducing stress and finding balance. And once again, when they're out of whack, those symptoms really marry the symptoms of irregular sex hormones in women. And so if you've got blood sugar balance symptoms and sex hormone symptoms and adrenal symptoms and thyroid function symptoms all working at the same time and all out of whack at the same time, you can imagine what that is doing to your symptom load. And you can therefore imagine how difficult it is for both you yourself as a woman over 40 and people like Julie and myself who are trying to help you through this transition, how difficult that is for us to ascertain exactly where you most need support. We also want to support gut function, and I'll talk about this a little bit further down the line. Biotransformation, that is your detoxification mechanisms, mainly through your liver and elimination. There's no really nice way of saying that, but it's the bit that comes out of the other side once we've eaten. Yeah, so I'll talk about why this is important further down the line, but it's related to us being able to not only get biotransformation right when it comes to our food, but also to get biotransformation of our hormones right as well. So what we don't want to happen is our body makes new fresh hormones, they enter the blood circulation, start going around, and then when they've done their job and they're, if you like, spent hormones, and we're trying to simplify this as much as possible, an endocrinologist would explain it in much more detail. But once those hormones have been spent, what we don't want them is re-entering the bloodstream and going round, because then they're competing with new hormones, newly created hormones, for this to do the same job. And so we want that to happen. We also want what are called xenoestrogens or foreign estrogens, things that come from plastics, chemicals, things like that, also to be eliminated from the body appropriately. So they also aren't going around and interfering with the uptake of new fresh hormones. And then finally, we want to support and protect muscle mass and bone strength. The latter, well, both of these, but particularly the latter, super, super important. As you'll see as we move further down the line, more than 50% of women over 50 in the Western world, both in the US and the UK, probably Australia as well, I'm not seeing the stats for over there, will have a fracture that is related to lowering levels of estrogen later in life. So the stronger we can get our bones, while we've still got time, the more we have, if you like, think of it like depositing bone mineral density into a bank. The more you can start to withdraw later without your overall deposits dropping to too low a level that would place you in any kind of financial trouble. So we'll talk about how we can protect muscle and bone strength as well down the line. So Julie, do you mind moving on for me? Thank you. So how can we achieve that then? So a couple of things. We're often asked, what should I eat and drink for better hormonal balance during the menopause transition? And it's equally important to think about how we eat and drink. So not just what's going in, but how we're actually doing it. So a couple of things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at mindful eating. So taking time to slow down. We'll explain why we need to do that. We're going to look at some intermittent fasting. And before anybody starts pulling us to pieces for using the F word in this context, it's worth noting that we're actually talking about what is called time-limited eating here. So kind of keeping eating to maybe a 12-hour or a 10-hour window. So your body's got plenty of time to take all those nutrients and use them. It helps with blood sugar balance. So really, really important. 3 meals a day and reducing snacks. And then what we eat and drink, well, as I said, snacks mainly, but what's in those snacks? So things like reducing sugar, additives, ultra-processed foods. We want to add in some good quality protein, healthy fats, We may want to include some phytoestrogens. They're plant-based substances that help mimic estrogen in the body to help with those fluctuating levels as we go through the menopause transition. We'll look at foods that promote good gut bacteria, because that's really, really important for estrogen metabolism. Foods that support the liver, as I mentioned, liver support crucial for helping us with detoxification. And then good quality caffeine if you're going to have coffee, and reducing and removing alcohol, because it's almost a swear word when it comes to some of our clients talking about alcohol. It's a really tricky subject, but the truth is it's likely not serving you well during this period of life for a number of different reasons. And therefore, reducing it or removing it is probably a good idea. But of course, Julie and I are not the alcohol police. We both enjoy a drink on occasion. And so it's very much a personal issue, but I think it's just worth remembering that it is not a nutrient, and it is certainly not supportive of helping support all our other hormonal balances as well. Okay, Julie, so you might move on to the next one for me. Thank you. So this is an interesting concept around how we actually eat. So our bodies have something called an autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system takes care of all the things that you don't want to think about. Breathing, heartbeat, digestion, things like that. Imagine if you were thinking to yourself, I've got to keep my heartbeat going for 60 beats a minute or 70 beats a minute. You have no time to think about anything else, right? So the autonomic nervous system takes care of things by itself, if you like. It comes from that autonom, self-done. And it branches down into two different branches. One is called the sympathetic nervous system. People will know this as fight or flight. There's often another F in there, freeze. Basically, it's what do we do in terms of crisis. And then we've got the parasympathetic nervous system, which is really rest and digest, or some people call it breed and feed. This is the one that people both know less about, because fight or flight is used colloquially lots when we speak in language. Rest and digest, less so. And not only do we talk less about resting and digesting, but it's also the thing that we probably do less of in this search for some kind of homeostasis or some kind of balance in the body. So why is this important? Well, the sympathetic nervous system was really, really important when we're developing and going through evolution to save us from, the woolly mammoth or the saber-toothed tiger that was coming down the road and was about to eat us. We had to either be able to fight our way out of a situation, run out of a situation, or freeze and hope that the saber-toothed tiger didn't take notice of us. It's less useful when it's engaged to deal with constant high levels of daily stress. And the truth is, we live in stressful times. We read the news, we work hard, we're online 24/7, and maybe even more than 24/7. If we could fit more hours a day to be online, I'm sure that we would do. What happens here is that our stress hormones kick in during fight or flight. And they kick in because what they do is some hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, they start flooding around the body. They tell us to shut off digestion. They tell us our hearts to beat quicker. They give us a quick boost of energy, ready for this fight or flight. The challenge for us is that too many stress hormones lead to a barrage of different symptoms if they're not being used appropriately. So depression, insomnia, fatigue, reduced libido, impaired immune function, insulin resistance. They're also all those symptoms of the menopause transition that many people come to us for help with. And so if you flip that over to the other side, parasympathetic side of things, these are important for digestion. If you're not digesting your food properly, how do you get the best nutrients out of it? Well, the answer is you don't. That's why talking about gut health has become so trendy over the last decade or two. It's important for repair, both mental, but also physical. Our new muscle is created sort of like when we're resting. New bone is created when we're resting. New hormones are created when we're resting. And there are really strong links between whether we're in balance or not, whether we are resting and digesting, and our gut health, obviously. And it's been proven that hot flashes, amongst other things, reduce the more parasympathetic activity we have. What does that mean? It's kind of like a medical-ish scientific term for meaning, right? If you chill out a bit more, your hot flashes could likely get less. So what is the challenge here then? That we spend a lot of our lives in this idea of being constantly on the run, constantly chasing things. Imagine yourself, and we all do this, and I know because I do it myself as well, so busy that we're sat there answering an angry email from our bosses at the same time as we're trying to cram a sandwich in because our lunchtime has been reduced. The challenge with that is because you're not flipped over to rest or digest, you're not going to digest your food properly. You're eating under stress, and therefore the whole thing becomes challenged and your symptom load increases. So a few tips then for how we can eat more mindfully. So a really simple, easy one that we teach many of our clients is just to take 10 deep belly breaths before a meal. And to do that, all you need to do is put one hand here on the top of your chest, one hand down here on your belly. And when you take a breath in, you don't want this hand to raise up, the top hand that's on your chest. You want this hand to raise up. So you're filling up your lungs. What is called your diaphragm, a big muscle down here, is dropping, and therefore you're filling up your lungs with some air. So 10 deep breaths, deep belly breaths. Taking time out to eat properly, 20, 30 minutes a meal if you can. That's a real challenge. I'll tell you now, any of you goes from this presentation straight into a meal, try and take 20 minutes to eat. It is hard. It is really hard. But what it does do is it helps you get better in touch with your appetite. Some tips for doing it: chew more slowly. Who would have thought all these things our mums used to tell us years ago, and now part of scientific advice from health coaches? You know, chew 30 times, we used to be told. Digestion starts in the mouth. You've got hormones that come into play. Amylase starts breaking down starches in the mouth. The grinding process breaks of you chewing, breaks down food and readies it better for digestion. And so really important, both from a digestive point of view, but from slowing things down. Put your cutlery down. That shouldn't say between meals. We've got a mistake there on the slide. It means between mouthfuls. Yeah. And enjoy the food. You look at countries like France and Italy, whereby they don't have massive levels of obesity, but they eat lots of rich food, lots of cream, lots of egg, lots of butter. They take maybe 2 hours to have lunch with a glass of wine and sit out in the sun and enjoy it. You know, so that slowing things down is really important. Chatting to someone instead of eating on your own. You know, if you're sitting down with the family, open up a conversation, talk about something you've been grateful for the day. Discuss your days, what's gone on. Helps communication, helps build family ties, but also helps with digestion as well and slowing things down. And please, if you can, put the phone and computer down, for many reasons, but most of all, take a break from work and allow your body to digest properly. So there are a few tips then for how we eat. Julie's going to take us through the main macronutrients, which are protein, fats, and carbohydrates.
Yes, and how we eat, and I agree with you that that whole working at your desk and speeding through, it makes such a difference when you actually take that time, undistracted time. So we are going to talk about the macronutrients now, which are the overarching big nutrients. We're not talking about specific vitamins and minerals and such, which are the micronutrients. We're going to talk about protein, fats, and carbohydrates. So protein is really important, and especially at this phase of life, because our bodies are less efficient at breaking proteins down. So we need a bit more of it in order to get what our bodies need. Proteins are an important source of energy for us. They're important for enzyme synthesis and antibodies in our immune system. It helps us maintain, because we want to have a nice base acid balance. You know, we talk about pH level. I see people are buying pH water. Really, if your food is in good proportion, you'll get a lot of what you need for balancing your pH without having to spend a lot of money on special waters that don't actually work, but that's a whole other discussion. Protein is especially important for repairing and maintaining your tissues. So, if we want to maintain muscular strength, we need to have adequate protein in order to do that. Protein is also essential in hormone production, which I think surprises some people to know. It's a messenger, so it helps transmit signals between molecules between cells, and it's really good for blood sugar balance because it's the most satiating nutrient. It digests very slowly, and therefore it keeps you feeling satisfied between meals. And I know personally, when I eat enough protein, cravings go away for me. So after that, we have fats, another important source of energy. We need fats in order to absorb certain fat soluble vitamins, which, as we listed here, are A, D, E, and K. Our cell structure is comprised of fats. Our brains use fats. We need to have fats in order to produce hormones. And it's a very important chemical messenger between cells. So a lot of this fat phobia that started in the 70s and 80s really did a lot of damage to our health. And I still see people eating low fat. It isn't the it isn't the well, the amount of fat is important, but it's more important the quality of the fat that you're eating. We need it for insulation. We need it to support our organs and protect our organs inside. And the integrity of the blood-brain barrier is very important. We don't want those xenoestrogens and all of these stress hormones and other chemicals leaking through into our brains. We have enough brain fog with menopause as it is. It's helpful for reducing inflammation. We need it for blood clotting. You can read the list here. Carbs are not quite as essential as proteins and fats. We do need them. They're a good source of energy, but we don't need them in the amounts that we typically eat them. They are vital for fiber, however, so we want to stay regular, and we'll talk more about the detoxification process. But fiber from carbohydrate is a very important piece of that. And most of the carbohydrates that we eat in the forms of fruits and vegetables and starchy tubers have a lot of important vitamins and minerals for us that also help support our immune function. So things to include are going to be really good quality protein. I know it's difficult sometimes with the prices of food increasing around the globe. I would say my recommendation would be buy the best quality protein you can afford, and then think about the other things after. My doctor told me, we when we are buying produce, vegetables, and fruits, we're getting a dose of potential chemicals in there. But when we're buying proteins, we're eating whatever it ate. So finding good quality protein, sustainably raised, grass-fed, ideal if you're looking at beef, pastured hens, if you're a meat eater, um, and things that are raised sustainably and organically. About 2 grams per kilogram of body weight is a good gauge. Again, it's dependent on you, your health, your activity level, how much you're used to eating, the source of your protein. There are a lot of different things, but those are things that we can guide you on. Your fats you can get from plenty of resources: olives, olive oil, coconut oil. Um, Avocados are great, and the nice thing about avocados is that they don't have a lot of strong flavor, so they mix well with other things. Nuts and seeds are also great. And vegetables. If you could cover half of your plate with good vegetables, that's a really good start to balancing your intake as far as food goes. We tend to not eat as many vegetables as we think we do. So less often, we want to look at the really starchy, carbohydrate, refined foods, highly processed foods, and sugars, of course. Sugar, the more you eat sugar, the more you crave sugar. So it's good to reduce that, plus the whole blood sugar balance. It's really important to reduce that or remove it as much as possible, and get your sugars from more natural sources. And of course, that includes everything I call the whites, right? White sugar, white bread, white pasta, white rice, all of the things that we tend to crave as comfort food. But when you get away from it, you'd be surprised at how less often you want it. Starchy carb vegetables like sweet potatoes, white potatoes, carrots, parsnips, which unfortunately we can't get in Italy. I miss them a lot. other lower carb alternatives. They make everything with cauliflower these days, rice, and I even have a bread recipe for cauliflower buns. And gluten-free grains are quite good. Quinoa, even though it's a carbohydrate, it does have complete proteins in it. So if you're a plant-based eater, that's a good resource for protein, as well as beans and legumes, gluten-free oats, buckwheat, those kinds of things that are gluten-free and tend to not bloat you quite as much. So that's a very quick and dirty on your macronutrients. So now James is going to talk more about blood sugar balance because this is really, really important.
Thanks, Julie. So just a comment on the cauliflower that you're saying it's become everything these days. I can't remember who said it, but I read somewhere the other day somebody was saying, in a world where cauliflower can become a pizza base, you can become anything you want.
That's awesome.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about blood sugar balance then. Now, a lot of us are probably familiar with the concept of getting crashes from blood sugar imbalance. And this is kind of a crash course in blood sugar balance and the hormones insulin and glucagon. I say a crash course, this is quite a complex subject, but we've tried to simplify it and make it as easy as possible. So glucose comes from the food that you eat. Carbohydrates particularly are broken down into molecules of glucose, which are a form of sugar that can give us some energy. And to help us deal with glucose, we don't want a lot of sugar running around our bloodstream. And so the body has brought into play two hormones that help us keep our blood sugars relatively stable, or that is their job, or was their job with the original design of the human body through evolution. And so insulin is a hormone that is made by the pancreas, and it helps the glucose that is in your blood go into your cells, where it is stored either for energy or it's stored as fat for later use. It can be stored in your muscles, it can be stored in your fat, it can be stored in liver. So when blood glucose levels after you've eaten something rise in your blood, your pancreas releases the insulin, and the insulin tells that blood sugar to go off and do something else, either produce energy or be stored as fat. And then because that means that the blood glucose levels have gone down, your body gets into somewhat of a balance. What then happens is your body will enter a phase where your blood glucose has gone too low, and in which case another hormone comes into play, which is called glucagon, and glucagon shuttles off to those stores of glucose or fat and tells the body to bring them back into the bloodstream for use. So we've got this balance going on between blood sugar levels that is dictated by the levels of insulin and glucagon. So if you move on for me, please, Julie. So this is how this would typically look. In this first curve, this is our blood sugar balance throughout the course of a 24-hour day. So assuming that we are going back to old school ways of eating, where we used to have 3 meals a day, we have something to eat in the morning. That first green level there is an increase in blood sugar. Your body releases insulin, and the blood sugar drops as it is shuttled off to be stored. Once it's decreased, your glucagon is put into play, and that promotes the uptake of stored glucose from the liver and the muscle. So this goes on throughout the day if we had 3 meals. Slight rise in insulin as blood sugar increases, and then as blood sugar falls, a slight rise in glucagon, and it would go through the day like that. What has become trendy over the last, or had become trendy maybe over the last 20 years or so, this concept of grazing over gorging, so constantly eating throughout the day. And Julie, if you could move on to the next slide, we'll just see how that looks. So if we do that, if we aren't waiting for our body to release glucagon, what happens is we have breakfast, there's a spike in glucose there, insulin is increased. Before we've had chance for glucagon, that other hormone, to kick in, we then have a snack, so blood sugar levels increase again, and then more insulin is released, and you will see that curve never goes back into that blue line where we want it to. And what happens there is this persistently high level of glucose in the blood, and therefore high levels of insulin in the blood, trying to shuffle it off, lead to a condition called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is one of the largest threats to our public health that we actually face at the moment from a self-induced point of view. So Julie, would you move on for me, please? Insulin resistance is a risk factor for chronic inflammation. We know by now that inflammation throughout the body is a killer. It's responsible, or the starting factor for so many different conditions and diseases. So obesity, cardiovascular disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that's when your liver starts to turn to fat without the presence of alcohol. Metabolic syndrome, that's a precursor of type 2 diabetes, and PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. So insulin resistance is a real challenge. Where there is a further challenge for ladies of your age, 40 and above, is that insulin resistance is also affected by estrogen deficiency or impaired estrogen signaling. What does that mean? Well, when you get to 40 and you start entering perimenopause, estrogen, fluctuates massively. And then as you proceed through the menopause transition, it starts to fall. When it starts to fall, it tends to fall off a cliff. With those imbalances at the start during perimenopause, and with the fall during menopause, the menopause years and after menopause, then you're more likely to become insulin resistant. So if you go back to those two slides previously in your mind, what we don't want is that middle scenario to take place, the one where we're snacking constantly, because all we're doing then is promoting insulin resistance naturally at a time when our bodies are becoming more insulin resistant because of the deficiency in estrogen anyway. So you're getting a double whammy, basically, which is why we advised that you try and stick to 3 key meals where you can to help with blood sugar balance. So this is from another study. In their 40s and 50s, fluctuating estrogen in women has been linked to insulin resistance. And here are a couple of the things that you might recognize from this. So peri and postmenopausal women tend to gain weight, especially in their midsection, so around here, because we're insulin resistant. Throw in stress as well. We talked about that previously, where we talked about cortisol. Cortisol also promotes increased weight gain around the belly as well. So you're actually throwing in extra levels there. Increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes, increase in urinary tract and vaginal tract infections. Now, that is a real unspoken area of the menopause transition, or less spoken about, that there is an increase of infections because of the difference in pH, the difference in our immune function, and potential insulin resistance as well. Sleep disturbances, well, many of you may be familiar with those. Increased chance of cardiovascular disease and increased risk of cognitive dysfunction. So that is the brain fog that we talk about. So you can see how being insulin resistant actually exacerbates so many of those issues that occur around the menopause transition anyway, and that so many of our clients come to us and say they have concerns about. So we said we'd talk about intermittent fasting, the F word. A couple of studies here. One is called the role of therapeutic fasting in women's health, and the other one is the effects of intermittent fasting on health, aging, and disease. So I'm just going to read these verbatim off the slides, because I think what the scientists have found out here is quite important and what we really should be focusing on. Well, by the way, just to be clear here, where it says fasting, we're talking about intermittent fasting, and intermittent fasting is time restricted eating, basically. So keeping it to a specific time period in the day. We aren't talking at this point about fasting for days and days on end. So just to make sure that's clear. So fasting is shown to improve the reproductive and mental health. It also prevents, as well as ameliorates, cancers and musculoskeletal disorders, which are common in middle-aged and elderly women. Okay, so from that, we concluded that this study was quite an extensive one, thinks that fasting could be a good tool at this age. Then the second one says fasting can be prescribed as a safe medical intervention as well as a lifestyle regimen, which can improve women's health in many different folds. So we've got two studies here that quite clearly show that intermittent fasting could be a tool when it comes to the menopause transition. So some takeaways then. So potentially considering it won't work for everybody. Some people just don't get on well with fasting at all or intermittent fasting at all. We tend to recommend to clients maybe trying to keep eating into a 12 or a 10-hour window. So if you think, you get up at 6, have breakfast at 7, and then dinner, last meal at night is 7 o'clock at night, that is not within the realms of the out of this world for most of us to do. Yeah, I think that's pretty normal for many people. So we aren't talking about any extremes here at all. You might want to drop that a little bit and experiment with maybe a 10 to 14 protocol, whereby you might be having your first meal at 9 and your last at 7 p.m., or your first meal at 7 a.m. and your last meal at 5 p.m. Reducing high sugar, high glycemic index foods, so those foods that spike our blood sugar balance, we want to reduce those. Talked about this in the previous slides, eating whole foods where possible, reducing snacks and keeping protein high. They're all things that will help with blood sugar balance and all things that we should be thinking about as we move on this journey through nutrition for women in the perimenopause. And I think Julie's now
So,
going to do some issues on gut health.
yes, gut health. And this is a perfect lead in because there are some really important things here. And by the way, when it comes to fasting, we already fast for a chunk of the 24-hour cycle, and that is from the time we go to bed to the time we get up in the morning. For the majority of people, that is a fasting period, which is why breakfast is, breaking the fast. So we're not talking about, going and sitting out somewhere in the woods and not eating for days on end. Um, we Nothing bad happens to us if we wait an extra hour or two to have that morning meal. But yeah, gut health is super essential. This is kind of our central operating system, if you will, outside of the brain. And it's called the second brain for a reason, because there's a very direct connection between the gut and the brain. And I tell people, you aren't what you eat, you are what you absorb. And one of the things that makes the difference as to whether you absorb the right things from your food is your gut microbiome. And I'm sure you've heard about that. I mean, I don't know too many people who don't take probiotics or eat yogurt or kefir or sauerkraut or fermented foods to try to improve. When you think about how many different microorganisms there are in our body, we are full of all kinds of different bacteria, fungi, um, microorganisms, and in some case even parasites. And keeping a healthy gut microbiome, meaning the bacteria that live in there, to help digest our food and boost our immune system and process all sorts of things that we need. We want to keep the good guys functioning well and the bad guys far less populated. So, there are hundreds of different kinds of bacteria in our gut, and they contain nearly 2 million genes. I mean, holy cow, that's a lot, right? And everyone's microbiome is unique, so it affects everything. A lot of depression, ADHD, mood swings, a lot of that can be connected directly to the gut. And of course the immune system, everybody knows how important that is, right? So because the research is still evolving, we don't fully understand exactly how it works, but we do know that at least 70% of our immune function is in our gut. So it behooves us to keep that very healthy. And one of the things that happens a lot of times is we overdo the antibiotics and we don't replenish the good bacteria that go in the gut. I know here in Italy, certainly anyone who's prescribed an antibiotic is also prescribed a probiotic to balance that out, because antibiotics are so, what do I want to say? They don't care which bacteria they kill. They're needed in certain circumstances, most definitely, but we also need to then repopulate what we've lost. And it also affects the way we store fat in our body. So sometimes a lot of what's going on in our bellies and our tummies can be changed by changing our gut microbiome, which of course is in great way influenced by and affected by what we eat. It also can help with insulin resistance and detoxification, of course, because that is our elimination tract, the start of our elimination tract. So we really need to pay attention to what's going on there. And our hormones, our female sex hormones, will have a big influence on our gut bacteria. And we have different hormone receptors everywhere, including in our gut. So we need to look at this pretty closely because it can have an effect on our weight, on our immune system, on where we store fat, breast cancer, periodontitis. I mean, we already know that oral health is connected to heart health and vascular health, and gut health is also a big important piece of that. And of course, osteoporosis. Nobody wants to end up there. So things that we can do to support our gut microbiome is look at getting, you know, the bacteria in our gut need something to eat. So we want to feed the good guys, and we do that through foods that we consider prebiotic, which means they help to keep those populations living and thriving and healthy. And those are things like apples and asparagus, bananas, cooked and cooled potatoes. There's something that happens with the way the starch breaks down when we cook them and cool them, so they're more digestible. Dandelion greens, quit spraying those out of your yard and go pick them and put them in a salad. It's also very supportive. Dandelion root is one of the best liver support herbs that you can get into, but that again is a whole other talk. And then, of course, there are probiotic foods. If you can handle dairy using plain yogurt, definitely unsweetened because we don't want to put the sugars back in. Sauerkraut, if you like it, is great. Any fermented kinds of food, fermented soy, kombucha, which is kind of fun to have. You can get lots of different flavors, fermented pickle. And if you really don't like any of those things, then taking a probiotic supplement can help you there. The important thing with a probiotic is to make sure you have multiple different strains of bacteria and always look at the count. But again, that's something that if you need guidance on that we can help you with. Um, your gut will tell you if you listen to it how it feels about the foods that you're eating. And a lot of times we don't realize what kind of response we have to these food until we actually take time to listen or we eliminate them and then reintroduce them. And that happened to me recently. I found out my gut doesn't like cashews, and that's very disappointing because I love cashews. But yeah, that wasn't something I ever want to happen again. But there are gut healing foods that you can use. So bone broth is really good. It's full of collagen and gelatin and things that your body needs, and it can be very healing to the gut. Um, Alcohol unfortunately damages the microbiome, so keeping that reasonably limited. And of course, ultra processed foods. Our bodies don't really know what to do with those things. So if we end up with um, micro tears in the lining of our intestinal tract, you've heard of leaky gut. That's what that is. And then undigested food molecules can get out into our body and into our bloodstream and trigger inflammation and all kinds of unpleasant symptoms. And of course, managing stress. You have that gut feeling, listen to your gut feeling. And a lot of stress resides in our gut. There's a very direct pathway through the vagus nerve system from the gut to the brain. And the last I read, 80% of those signals go from the gut to the brain, and then the brain decides how to respond. So when we have a healthy gut, it makes managing stress a little bit easier. So that's what I've got to say about that. And now, leading through the digestive tract and the gut, James is going to talk about detoxification.
Okay, so detoxification, it's, as we alluded to earlier in the presentation, it's a really important part of anybody's journey, right? It's the thing that gets rid of, I can't put this any more politely than all the crap out, right? It's all the stuff we don't want going back around our bodies, gets expelled, and the liver plays a great part in that because it takes loads of different toxins, byproducts, waste, and all that kind of stuff. And it changes them from being fat soluble, which is stuff that hangs around in your body, to being water soluble, which means that you can then either pee or poop them out. So that is what biotransformation is. What happens when it doesn't take place is you get this concept called enterohepatic recirculation, whereby things have not been cleared properly by the liver, and they come back round and do a second or third or fourth pass around the body. That's dangerous and problematic if it is toxins, foreign substances, things that we don't want in there. But it's also challenging if it's things that we want to be eliminated. I'll invite you to think about the fact that we have, or women have, estrogen receptors all over the body. It's such an important hormone, but we don't even know the full extent of its importance right now. But those estrogen receptors act like, think of them like a lock and key system. And so each one is a little lock. As estrogen goes around the body, it finds one of these estrogen receptors and it binds in there with a fit, like a lock into a key. When it's done its job, it's released and it goes back around the circulation and is then eliminated. So if you've got estrogen that's been used coming round for a second pass, and therefore it's had all the, in inverted commas, use taken out of it, or you've got things that mimic estrogen, like chemicals and toxins and things like that, they can sit in the same place and they can stop the good estrogen from getting in and doing its job, basically, is what's happening. So that lock and key image there is quite key. There are a number of things that can inhibit detoxification, but that we'll see on the next slide. So a really high toxic load. It's really interesting, you know, the number of people that I've had in the past who've come to me and they've had a lot of health challenges, and we look at loads of different things around their lifestyle and things like that. And it's only when you dig into things like, what do they do for a job? Do they work with lots of chemicals? Hairdressers at one point used to have dreadful problems with detoxification. People who live in houses that have got high levels of mold and fungus can be really challenged. Yeah. So if you've got an overwhelming toxic load, things that you don't want can be really challenging. Impaired elimination. So that is basically constipation. Yeah. If you're taking time, a lot of time, to actually eliminate the waste from your body, it has more chance to enter circulation. You need antioxidants. We talk about these a lot. We'll talk about them more in the supplements thing to help with detoxification. So if you've not got a high level of antioxidants, that can be a challenge. And then imbalances in your gut bacteria, which Julie was just talking about, and external stress. The thing that's interesting here is that when you look at this now, you can see how all these concepts overlie within each other, and how that idea of the orchestra, or making it less of a roller coaster, more of a merry-go-round, comes into play, because there are so many things where everything overlaps to a point. You've got stress that affects blood sugar balance, that affects detoxification, that affects your hormone levels, that affects the way you eat. You've got gut bacteria that affects how you metabolize estrogen. Gut bacteria inhibits detoxification. Gut bacteria helps, gut bacteria will help with blood sugar balance. So you can see how all these concepts come around, and we revisit them again and again and again on this journey of looking at perimenopausal and menopausal health through a holistic lifestyle lens. So some ideas for liver support, things you can do. So we want to increase vegetables. That is one of the reasons we said 50% of your plate should be vegetables. There are certain ones that can help a lot. Julie mentioned dandelion leaves before, artichoke, watercress, are a couple of others. Increasing fiber, flaxseed can be a great help. Flaxseed is also what is known as a phytoestrogen. So they are plant substances that mimic estrogen. I mentioned those early on in the presentation. Green tea is really good. That has certain substances that can help with detoxification. Once again, the alcohol police are back out. Yes, reducing alcohol can help with liver support. What do we talk about? They've got a pickled liver. It's a well-known expression, at least here in the UK. People drinking too much stops their liver from working, can lead to lots of different diseases. Reducing those foreign estrogens and other chemicals, supplementing with antioxidants, we'll talk about those. And of course, the all-important stress reduction that we seem to talk about on almost every slide that we come up to. No wonder Julie and I say that stress is the #1 enemy of women in the menopause transition. It really is. It affects so many different things. So let's run quickly through bone health and how food and good lifestyle can help with bone health. So a couple of facts here from governing bodies and charities that look into these kind of things. So the Royal Osteoporosis Society here in Britain says there are 3.5 million people living in the UK with osteoporosis. And I think I mentioned this before, 1 in 2 women, so 50% of women on this call, well, not on this call, because you're obviously going to take all our advice and use it, but 50% of women overall will break a bone because of osteoporosis. And it's ill-informed perception that it's unavoidable. There are things that you can do to help. Over in the US, the CDC says that there are 10.2 million over 50 living with condition, another 44 million living with low bone density. So that is, I'm not sure what the definition is in the US of low bone density, but in the UK, that would be leading to a condition that we call osteopenia, which is the precursor of osteoporosis. So a real challenge. So this is from a report by the Royal Osteoporosis Society in the UK. Menopause is an important moment in a woman's bone health. This is because the estrogen hormone that's important for keeping bone density stable and maintaining bone strength decreases. As a result, bone density starts to go down too. With this loss of bone density comes reduced bone strength and a greater risk of breaking bones. So we'll talk then a little bit today about how food can help, but also things like strength training, things that we'll talk about in future sessions are also important as well. The key thing is, in my research at least, I've only managed to find one set of dietary recommendations for the prevention and treatment of osteoporosis. This comes from France. And the research there says the Mediterranean type diet and the daily consumption of 2 to 3 dairy products are recommended. Together, these provide calcium and high quality protein required to maintain a normal calcium phosphorus balance and bone metabolism, and are associated with lower fracture risk. Conversely, unbalanced Western diets, vegans, weight loss diets in non-overweight individuals, alcohol consumption, again, and daily consumption of sodas are advised against. So if you think about all the advice that we've talked about today, ostensibly, it mimics the Mediterranean diet. So high protein, lots of good fats, lots of non-starchy carbohydrates, fiber, all these things part of the Mediterranean diet, part of the things that we've talked about. And this kind of encapsulates it once again, how this kind of eating not only helps with blood sugar balance, potentially can help support menopause symptoms, but can also help with bone mineral density drop that happens as estrogen begins to fall. And I think that's a good time there to start talking about our last couple of things. We have spoken for quite a while. We're coming up to the hour mark. So we're going to do supplements, first of all. And all we're going to do here is, this could be a whole 2-hour presentation on its own. So we're going to talk about the 5 or 6 major supplements, 5 or 6 major herbs that we think can help. So I'll do the first bit on supplements, and Julie's going to take over for herbs. Magnesium, #1 for me, at least. It's responsible for 300 plus mechanisms in the body. It can help with insulin resistance. Energy tends to drop during the menopause transition, so it can help with metabolism. There is some research that it shows that it helps with several different symptoms: hot flushes, sleep, migraines. And an often overlooked element of the menopause transition is the reduction in female libido. Usually comes from low testosterone, and magnesium can help with that. It helps convert vitamin D into its active form as well. And glycinate is the form. There's lots of different forms of magnesium, so you kind of need to delve into this a little bit deeper. But glycinate is one that's easily absorbed. It's more what we call bioavailable, so works better. Number two, we've mentioned vitamin D. There is vitamin D. It's actually got more in common with a hormone than vitamins. It also works on 300 plus different bodily functions and mechanisms. It also, strangely enough, vitamin D receptors tend to be in the same place that estrogen receptors are. So there's a link between vitamin D and estrogen that we're not quite sure what it is yet, but vitamin D is really, really important. Good for mood, good for bone health, and it helps with insulin sensitivity. Vitamin D, it's called sunshine vitamin. Ordinarily, we get it from exposure to the sun. Where is that a challenge? Well, it's a challenge if you're African American, Asian, naturally have darker skin, olive skinned. That melanin in the skin stops you from producing as much. We live in an era where we're rightly so highly protective against skin cancer, and therefore we all tend to walk around with a high level factor sunblock on us. So we go out then, don't tend to get a lot of sunlight because of that sunblock. That sunblock will also stop vitamin D receptors from working. And then finally, if you're unlucky enough like me to live here in the UK, in the north of the UK, we don't have much daylight and we have really bad weather. And that means we don't get to see the sun a lot anyway, particularly in winter. And so if you do live somewhere that's nice, warm and sunny, really simple, nice, easy protocol is just to roll your sleeves up early in the morning, go out for 15, 20 minutes and without sunblock on before the sun's rays get too high and get too carcinogenic. And therefore that can work. Otherwise, supplementing is really, really important. You want to look for D3 where possible. D2 is less readily absorbed and is a bit of a challenge for vegans as well. Omega-3s, we talk a lot about good, healthy fats. Omega-3s are really, really important. Certain ones, the ones found in evening primrose oil, have been shown to reduce the severity of hot flashes. They can help improve things like depression. They help with cardiovascular health, important for joint health and important for our brain health. So really, really important. The challenge is that they mostly come in our diets from oily fish, and some people don't like oily fish, and therefore supplementing might be a good idea. I would always say with omega-3s, get the best quality you can find and you can afford. The fish, if you have a fish-based one that the oils come from, tend to swim in increasingly polluted waters, and therefore you don't want that passing into, as Julie said before, you know, when you're eating animals, fish, or the sentient beings, you're actually eating what they've eaten as well. So look for things that come from fish that tend to be Arctic or Antarctic, where the waters are pure and clean. That can help. B vitamins, super, super important. B vitamins are water soluble, so you pee them out. And people will say to you, vitamins are a waste of money because you pee them out. Yes, you do. And you're meant to do that once they've gone around the body and done their thing. So therefore you want the best, again, the best levels that you can buy. Really, really important for depression, important for serotonin, feel-good chemicals, and estrogen. Great for energy levels, helps convert food into energy. Support for your adrenal glands. If you're overstressed, B vitamins can help. And B1 and B6 have been shown to be beneficial in reducing hot flushes and mind swings. Apologies for the hot flushes, hot flashes. Sometimes the language comes from the original source. Tends to be hot flashes in America, tends to be hot flushes here in the UK. In America, the language is starting to change towards hot flushes. The reason being that people think that hot flashes makes it sound as though they come and go in seconds, and we know that they don't. And so hot flushes is becoming the more accepted terminology, but sometimes it depends where we get the source material from for the slides. Calcium, we mentioned this in the Mediterranean diet section and the section on bone health. Really, really important. Not a lot of evidence say you need to supplement from it, but you can get it naturally in your diet from seeds, bony fish, dairy, and greens. Bony fish would be things like tinned mackerel and things like that, where you sometimes get those small little pin bones in there that you can actually just eat and be fine. And then zinc stops really important for immune system, the number one thing that people use it for. Important for depression as well. Also important for sex function. However, as women age, there can be an excess of androgens, which are the male sex hormones, and that can lead to things like increased facial hair and stuff like that. So zinc can help with those excess androgens as well. And another thing that is often not talked about in circles around menopause is the issue of vaginal dryness during the menopause. If you want to carry on having an active sex life, zinc can help there. And then collagen that we love. It's the most abundant protein in the body, part of every tissue, really, really important for skin and connective tissue health. Things like hair. It says there's studies on oral collagen use are mixed. That tends to be down to the quality of collagen that's been studied. With all these things, I always think if you're going to spend money on them, getting them into your diet via non-food sources, I would always buy the best that you can find. There's a really good company here in the UK called Pura. It's owned by an American lady who's worked in sports science over in the US for many, many years and created her own collagen blend here in the UK during the first lockdown. And it's absolutely top class. I don't know an American equivalent, unfortunately. So that's me on supplements. Julie's just going to run through some herbs to round things off.
I will. And I love herb. I'm a master herbalist, so this is a thing I love to talk about. But I want to preface this by saying, please, please do not add any herbal supplements without speaking to someone who knows about herbal supplements. I have two very thick reference books that I use regularly before I ever recommend them to anyone because there can be interactions between herbs, vitamins, and medications. So self-supplementing with herbs can be very potent. They can be very strong. They can be very helpful for your health. So they're really good when they're used in the right way, in the right amounts, in the right delivery system. So before you run out and try to buy all of these things, let's have a conversation because I want to make sure that there aren't any contraindications for you. So black cohosh, it's been known to help reduce menopausal symptoms. Again, the extract, how it's delivered, how it's extracted, the potency of it will make a difference. But it's a very common one that's used in not just menopause, but also in during your childbearing years. Red clover may reduce hot flashes. Or hot flushes. That's been known to work well for some people. Ashwagandha I love because it's called an adaptogen. And one of the nice things about adaptogenic herbs, so you have ashwagandha, astragalus, all of your different ginsengs, they're adaptogenic, which means they will sense in the body where something needs to be stimulated or down regulated. So it's something that you can take for specific conditions. If you're producing too much of something or have an overactive system, it will calm it down. And if you have something that's functioning at too low a level, it will help bring it up. So adaptogens are great, and they're often used in Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine. Some studies for ashwagandha have shown that it's been good for some of the symptoms of menopause. Licorice root is a really great one as well. It is called the mother herb in Chinese medicine. It's really supportive of detoxification, especially in the liver, and it has a mild estrogenic effect on the body. So if your estrogen is very low, it won't produce estrogen, but it sort of mimics some of the estrogenic function. The only caveat here is that if you have blood sugar issues, if you're diabetic, licorice root is not recommended. Um, so next we have astragalus, which again is one of my favorites. I actually take this. It's another adaptogen. Its effects cover the metabolism. It's been shown to have tonic effects on the heart function. It's good for circulation. It helps with blood sugar balance and your immune system. It also helps with elimination through urine and kidneys, supporting the kidneys in that part of the detoxification process. Wild yam you may see in a lot of different creams that say they help with hormone balance. It is really good for cleansing the liver, and it has a lot of good anti-inflammatory effects, especially if you're someone who has suffered from endometriosis. Um, it's it's one of its known functions is to help break down excess estrogen in the liver and help it process out of the body. Blessed thistle is another good one. Again, for the liver and detoxification, it's in there with the breaking down excess estrogen, so it's a good one. And then Vitex is also fairly common, also known as chaste tree berry. It works by stimulating pituitary gland function as it relates to the production of female hormones. The pituitary is a really key gland in the endocrine system. And it may be helpful. They have shown some of the studies that I have in from my herbal books have shown that it can be very calming for emotional distress that we feel, especially as it's related to depression and low moods around menopausal symptoms. So it's another one that a lot of people like to use in supporting menopausal symptoms. So those would be my top herbs. But again, please don't just go out and buy them. That you need to understand how to use them. There are many different forms. So if you're interested, just let me know. We can talk about it. So time to bring everything together. Um, we've given you a whole lot of information here, and you have additional information in the workbook. I think James and I probably the biggest thing we tell people is please don't try to change everything at once.
Yeah,
Think
it's
about,
really to just pick one or two things that
yeah,
you think work the best for you, I think, and then ask yourself whether you really think you can do them on a scale of 1 to 10. Ideally, you're looking for a 9 or a 10. So we always say to people, you know, make the goal so low you can't trip over it, and then you're definitely going to achieve it. And you can always then build on that. What can I do to make it a 9 or 10? What can I do to increase it? So
mhm,
start small. When you've got something nailed, then start looking for something different or something additional. So it may be that you just want to pick eating more protein is the first thing to change, or eating less sugar, or reducing your alcohol. Any of those things would all work.
yeah. The other thing I would say is that make sure you're on a 9 or a 10 on that 1 to 10 scale and stick with it because a lot of these things aren't going to have miraculous outcomes in a short period of time. These are subtle changes that take your body time to adjust to, and you may not realize that these changes are happening. And I think where a lot of people fall down is they try something for a few weeks, they don't notice anything significant, and so they stop. But especially when it comes to dietary changes and supplements or other things that you may be doing, it may take a period of time for those things to really show up. Um, so I would say give it time, get some coaching to help you along the way if that's something that you would like to do. Obviously, we're here to support you and always celebrate your wins.
Fabulous.
Right. I'm going to stop my share. That's what we've got for you today. Please, questions you have, what your biggest takeaways were, and how we can support you. And then we will see you in the next session for talking about movement.
Okay, see you then.